It's a place that you can make a lot of money. It's a place that you can be happy. Those two things are hard to do. You have to have a
Yeah,
market, you
sure.
have to have a policy, you have to have a product in order to make
Hmm.
money. You have to have the right territory, you have to have a good leadership. It's a place where you can make an impact.
When I look at your profile, one of the things that jumps out to me at first is one of your highest rated areas is product market fit.
One of the things that's nice about Motive is that we do have a defined scope for what we're trying to accomplish. We are serving the physical economy. We're looking to make them safer, more productive, and more profitable. We are not looking to do a whole bunch of other things. It is a massive market, well over $200 billion of TAM, and we do it extremely well. Not every technology is actually saving people's lives. When
Okay.
you can get inspired around that, it makes for something that you can learn and articulate and buy into very quickly.
Hey, this is Jordan from RepVue. I sat down this week with Adam Block, CRO at Motive, to talk about what it takes to build and lead one of the fastest growing sales orgs in tech. From his scrappy entrepreneurial roots to running global revenue at a 3,700 person AI powerhouse, Adam brings a refreshingly real take on sales leadership. We dig into Motive's standout RepVue profile, why their reps are among the most optimistic in the industry, and what sets their ramp, comp, and culture apart. Adam breaks down why OTE is often a mirage and why great leaders coach like teammates. Also, why human connection still beats automation. If you're in sales, I think this one is worth your time. Check it out. For people out there who might not be familiar, tell us more about, what is Motive for somebody who's not familiar?
Yeah, sure. So, Motive, we support businesses with physical operations. Maybe I'll talk about who we serve and then it kind of
Hmm.
like how it works, right? Industries like transportation and logistics, construction, energy, field services, lots of public sector. You have everything from school buses to police vehicles, and they shape this entire physical operations market. And really, these are the businesses and the people producing and distributing all of our goods and services, essentially making up 50% of our GDP. So,
Okay.
we have a great opportunity because there's so many potential applications for our technology across these industries, and it makes us well positioned to capture the segment of the market that's highly dependent on vehicles and machinery and physical labor and natural resources. We're the leader of artificial intelligence in the physical economy. And so, what does that mean, right? Well, you can see where an item is, right? Track and trace has been around a long time. You can see where your Uber
Okay.
driver is. You can see where your
Sure.
pizza is on the way. And there's a lot of things like camera systems out there that can tell you what happened after it happens. But our technology is best in class at preventing unsafe behaviors. When you incorporate something like a spend component to it, it
Hmm.
becomes really powerful. One of the biggest problems that I don't know that I appreciated when I entered this industry is how much fraud and waste exists, spend in the physical economy. So
Okay.
if you are going and filling up your a vehicle,
Mhm.
right, corporate card to do it,
Sure.
we know what's going on
Mm.
with that vehicle in real time. So
Interesting.
we can
Got
tell
it.
that vehicle's not even there. They're
Got it.
using that vehicle's not there, or that
Interesting.
person purchased,
Right.
80 gallons of fuel
Yeah,
and
yeah.
only 30 of
And
them got into
only
the vehicle. But from a sales perspective, we look for the best people, regardless of where they're from, and we've been able to attract great talent. And of course, the interesting phenomenon, as you've probably seen, is then they attract great talent, right? So,
Hmm.
so it
Yeah.
becomes a culture of folks that have a high performance and accountability to each other. And so right now we are growing. We're continuing to grow. We have a lot of open roles. I don't see that stopping in the next 3 years.
Cool.
And so if you're interested and if you're somebody who's super driven, this might be a place for you.
You mentioned Motive as an AI company. AI is probably the hottest topic in a lot of industries, but certainly in sales. I think people are talking a lot about AI tools and that sort of thing. Tell us, what is your view on sort of how AI tools should be part of the sales process or maybe how they shouldn't be?
Well, I think we're still figuring it out. I will start
Sure.
there. There's a lot of work to go. We have an AI operations function within our business, and this is all they do,
Okay.
right? I
Okay.
think that there's a little bit too much eagerness to try and automate some things, and I think it can be a bit of a red herring, right? Think of sales development, right? SDRs. We have a wonderful SDR team, really a high performing culture there. And there's been a lot of talk about, how do you automate the SDR function? And I think you got to be careful, right? I mean, I think you just really have to be careful to look around and try
Sure.
to automate something where there's a human connection. And so
Okay.
I think where we are right now are things like data access, right? So when I think about the way in which we run our business and we access knowledge banks and we think about, what are my top deals and how is this org performing and what were the big
Hmm.
topics in this meeting that I didn't attend? We have some great tool sets right now that
Okay.
allow us to easily access things that previously would have been many discussions or Slacks
Mm.
or reviews within Salesforce or go to this doc and read it, right? And
Okay.
so I think AI has been super helpful there. I think
So you're
AI
talking about
is
operational efficiencies within the business.
Yes, but it's
Okay.
not just that. It's even, understanding why you're winning and why you're losing. I mean, if you think
Oh,
about the
okay.
challenge in a doing that, you would write up giant postmortems or
Hmm.
win stories and read them out and then, try to categorize them in certain buckets and figure out how that's going. Well, now
Hmm.
AI can ingest a lot of that information and give
Hmm.
you even a podcast. You can say, turn this into a
Sure,
podcast,
sure.
which I've listened
Yeah,
to.
yeah,
Nothing will get you fired up like listening to a churn podcast, by the way, on
yeah.
why is it that a customer has left
Yeah.
is always fires you up. I
Right,
think
right.
so things
Interesting.
like that, the access to information and
Hmm.
trends and data is
Yeah.
available now. That is available
Right.
right
Okay.
now, and every company should go and improve the way in which they can see those things.
Interesting.
I do think that things that have also taken a long time, like preparation, right, for an AE and a sales engineer or
Hmm.
leadership when they're looking, especially on big deals, right? You talk about
Yeah.
enterprise strat, they do a lot of prep, right? The
Yep.
account planning
Yep.
process is heavy in those
Hmm.
areas. And it does serve a function, right? You want to know your customers. You know, if AI is going to put this together for you, that's fine. But the
Hmm.
idea is when you show up, that you
Right,
know
right.
what a company does and how they make money and how they break down from a segment perspective and how they are differentiated from others and how they might compare to other use cases. Well, I think AI can prepare you for that conversation faster than it ever has been able to
Hmm.
before. But I think the risk here, if I'm going to take the other angle, is that we
Sure.
over rotate, right?
Okay.
Especially in our business. I mentioned us
Yeah.
being a physical operations, physical economy market is that we're serving. That's that,
Hmm.
these are people that have physical assets. They have real tangible things.
Yeah.
And so they work in the field. They work in offices. They work in warehouses and oftentimes very dangerous conditions. We were just having a customer
Hmm.
talking about the molten steel that they had
Mm.
to test our equipment to make sure it could withstand these wild temperatures. And
Wow.
it does.
Okay.
It was interesting.
All
It was
right.
like, all right, let's give
Interesting.
it a go.
Yeah.
And but they want a real connection, right?
Hmm.
So if you think about these tools, like, tools that would automate things like, say, customer success, right? Okay, you have tools
Right.
that might go in and it would develop an AI model to look at all the various signals that a customer has with your
Hmm.
organization, try to develop a health score and an action plan.
Sure.
Well, that's fine. But if you're just depending on that and you're not making contact with the customer consistently and you don't have
Okay.
a relationship and you're not talking to an executive and a program
Hmm.
owner and various users throughout the business, I think that's a massive miss. And I think that's what's going to
Hmm. Okay.
happen here is that folks are going to continue leaning on AI, thinking that it's going to automate a lot of the human connection. And the truth is that it's not. So I think
Hmm.
both things have to happen here. But
Okay.
I would say the SDR function is interesting. The ability to
Yeah.
make more
Interesting.
contact at scale, the ability to
Right.
do a little bit of marketing. But right now, those are the things we figured out. But boy, it is fast moving, and we have a just huge investment into understanding it and how we can leverage things. I think the top topic right now is agents, right? Everybody talks about AI,
Right.
and I think
Yep.
that means something different to every business.
Besides AI tools, what would you say is, in your opinion, what's one aspect of sales that's, much more important now maybe than it was 5 years ago?
It is the human connection. I mean, when was the last
Okay.
time that you had to return something to a store? The other day, I had to return something to a major retailer, and
Hmm.
it was really hard. I couldn't figure out how to get them on the phone. And I feel like I'm a decently, competent
Sure.
person.
Right.
It
Right.
shouldn't
Yeah.
be this
Uh-huh.
hard, right? And
Yeah.
then, so I'm chatting, and it was a virtual assistant. It was an AI bot.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
it was just really frustrating to figure out how to get this done. So finally, they got a human on there with me, and they resolved it quickly. But I think the human connection is the thing that is undervalued, that used to be more valued. I
Right.
think that this remains the single most valuable tool for a
Hmm.
sales organization is having a group that can do what I just said and then
Okay.
talking to people and providing great service. that isn't robotic. And so
Yeah, yeah.
I know that sounds simple. It's not easy,
Hmm.
right? It's actually quite challenging to keep up with it. And then there's another side of this, right? Get to know
Hmm.
the company. So when we want to
Okay.
say why do anything, why is it that you're going to make this change? I
Hmm.
find that a lot of AEs and SEs and folks in business value, I think we do it better than most. I will say that. I
Right.
think that this remains the single most valuable tool for a
Hmm.
sales organization is having a group that can do what I just said and then
Okay.
talking to people and providing great service that isn't robotic. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I know that sounds simple. It's not easy,
Hmm.
right? It's actually quite challenging to keep up with it, but I don't think. And then there's another side of this, right? Get to know
Hmm.
the company. So when we want to
Okay.
say why do anything, why is it that you're going to make this change? I
Hmm.
find that a lot of AEs and SEs and folks in business value, I think we do it better than most. I will say that. But I find that a lot of folks that are in go to market in general, that they try to answer that question. And I
Okay.
want the customer to answer that question. I mean, the customer is the one that's going to do something. So you can
Mm-hmm.
call it discovery, you can call it an engagement, but it's a
Hmm.
natural discussion, naturally curious, right, is what we might say. Learn about
Right.
their business. What is happening? Why would they want to pay money?
Right.
And then why would they want to go through the perceived pain of changing systems or installing
Hmm.
something or implementing something and changing behaviors on the back
Yeah.
end? Like there has to be a reason. And there always is, or else there's no transaction. But I find that like when a customer can articulate that or we can help them articulate that, it not only creates a better bond by going back to that human connection, but it
Yeah.
creates more urgency because usually they are aware of it. They're just not like fully articulating it in a
Hmm.
business value sense.
What's an unpopular opinion that you would say you hold about sales, or something that maybe goes a little bit against the conventional wisdom?
I'll start with sales leadership, maybe,
Okay.
because I think this is one that's always fired me up. I grew up in the era of reading a lot of Peter Drucker
Okay.
and reading a lot of things that were about, from McKinsey and Company, and
Hmm.
a lot of folks that studied management and leadership. If you read Jim Collins' Good to Great, there's a lot of
Sure.
examples of this in there. And
Hmm.
they talk about leadership as something that is highly philosophical sometimes
Okay.
and frankly a little bit removed. I'm a
Okay.
leader and I need to teach my team how to do things so they can do these things. I think that's true, but I think it's more true as you become a leader of leaders. I think it's
Okay.
less true at the frontline level. And
Interesting.
what I mean by that is that I think we've been kind of fooled by some leadership consultants to believe that you go out and take AEs as an example, right? And it doesn't
Hmm.
have to be AEs, it can be whatever function. And assume
Yeah.
that individual contributor is always in control of what they've got going on. They need help. That's what
Okay.
you're there for. You're there to offer help. And so what I
Hmm.
found that
Hmm.
inspires most AEs, that what they're most after is they want to win. They want to
Sure.
win. So the more that a leader can be engaged in deals and help them, whether that means take over the negotiation or it might mean make the
Hmm.
connections, leverage leadership
Right.
to be engaged in different parts of the cycle, or it might mean to challenge the presentation or the approach or participate in a meaningful way. Make your own champion.
Hmm.
Let the AE
Hmm.
make their champion, have a sales engineer have a champion, whatever.
Right. Right.
I think that's something that's been very apparent to me over my leadership career is that the frontline leader is, I mean, I dare say an extension of the AE, but they're the
Okay.
ones that have to help because individual
Got it.
contributors are not all alike. I mean, it's sort of like a basketball team. You wouldn't ask Shaq to go and shoot 3-pointers, right?
Hmm.
And so you're
Yeah.
going to have
Probably
to
not.
flank him by shooting threes and free throws, right? And necessarily, Steph Curry isn't going to take the ball to
Hmm.
the hoop and just slam it on somebody like Giannis does.
Right. Right.
I think it's really important that the leader is the one that recognizes that and helps that person to
Okay.
fill the gaps. What I found is the most senior people, they behave like leaders. So if you take the
Hmm.
most
Okay.
senior AEs out there, take your most we have folks here that make millions of dollars. Okay, so you
Hmm.
have
Hmm.
somebody who is in a business and they do very well, which means they're valued by their customers. They're
Yep.
they're working with big deals or lots of deals, of course. And to do that successfully, you have to work your ecosystem. You
Hmm.
have to bring in subject matter experts. You have to bring in leadership. You have to have really solid project management about what's going to happen after a transaction because the
Hmm.
transaction is not the relationship. Our customers are not happy until they are getting value out of our partnership, and that does not happen at point of contract.
Right.
And so
Okay.
these folks are behaving like leaders of their deal teams. And as you get more junior, folks feel like they need to do it all themselves. And so
Okay.
I think that's one thing for folks to learn, especially if you're earlier in your career. It is, I think it's counterintuitive. They're like, hey, I need to show that I can do this thing. Well, actually, you need to show that you can use the expertise in your organization in a meaningful way in
Okay.
front of your customer, and you will win more, and it will actually be less effort. It's just a different type of effort, I would say. And so I think that's maybe the one thing that the two things, one's leaders and one's for the individual.
This is a RepVue conversation, so let's get into some of the details of your profile in RepVue, and some of the positives, and also some of the things that if I was just a sales rep user looking at your profile in RepVue, some of the things I might have questions about. I'm going to help to try to articulate some of those so you can answer those questions that people might have. Does that sound good?
Good.
Cool. All right. So I would say number one, probably thing that people ask about when they're looking at sales roles on RepVue is, selling something that people want to buy, or the more formal way to say that might be product market fit, something that solves a real problem. So when I look at your profile, one of the things that jumps out to me at first is one of your highest rated areas is product market fit. You're in the 87th percentile. How would you kind of characterize the reason for such a high product market fit score?
We are not a horizontal SaaS that's a hammer looking for a nail. And those applications
Okay.
have a lot of use in business and in operations. One of the things that's nice about Motive is that we do have a defined scope for what we're trying to accomplish. We are serving the physical economy. We're looking to make them safer, more productive, and more profitable. And in some
Okay.
areas, more secure and more safe and more secure. And so that's what we build our hardware and software and AI to do. Period.
Okay.
We are not looking to do a whole bunch of other things. It is a massive market, well over $200 billion of TAM, and we do it extremely well. Our
Okay.
churn is very low. Our customers are happy, generally speaking,
Mm-hmm.
and they come back, they upsell, they
Okay.
refer others. And so I think that's what it is. I mean,
All
I
right.
will give our product teams, I will give Schwab, our CEO, and the founding team just an extraordinary amount of credit here. And one thing too, Jordan, I think is interesting for folks that are listening is that it makes it, I'm not gonna say easier to sell, it makes it maybe simpler to sell. And what I mean by that is
Okay.
that the number of use cases is somewhat defined, right? I mean, it's not unlimited. Right. And
Okay.
so one of the challenges when you go into an organization is ramping. How am I going to learn how to articulate what this thing does and the kind of value that
Mm-hmm.
it brings? And how tangible is that value? Like we've all seen all of these ROI things that are sort of like
Sure.
hand wavy and
Right.
question. Well, ours is very
Plug in.
hard, right? I
Okay.
mean,
Right.
we
Right.
can
So.
measure cost and
Mm-hmm.
insurance and claims and lives and lawsuits, and there's all
Right.
these
Right.
things that we can measure that are hard facts that are happening within a business. We install our
Mm-hmm.
products and we watch it, right?
Yeah.
And
Interesting.
so
Right.
that's super inspirational. And I would say there's one other thing here, and that is not every technology is actually saving people's lives. When
Okay.
you can get inspired around that and you have the product market fit, to your point, to go with it, it makes for something that you can learn and articulate and buy into very quickly.
So obviously, when people think about sales roles, one of the first things they think about is comp. Let's talk about that. When I look at the comp scores on RepVue from your RepVue ratings, the base comp kind of sentiment score is in the 59th percentile, so pretty good. And the variable comp score, though, is in the 83rd percentile. So there's a significant, difference there with people's focus, particularly on the variable piece. I'd be curious if that's what you would have expected. Is that surprising to you? And what do you think that reflects the way you pay your salespeople and the culture at Motive?
I love it. I love it. I
Okay.
mean, listen, I've been on a variable comp my entire life. When you're an
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneur, that's all you are on, right? Is 100% commission.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have folks that earn into seven figures, of course, and their OT is not seven figures. Okay. They
Right.
have to
Right.
earn the vast majority of their compensation
Mm-hmm.
differently. And so I think one of the biggest farces in the sales world is OT. Right? It
For
is an
sure.
OT. What does this mean? Well,
Mm-hmm.
because to your point, product market fit. The product market fit, according to your users, is nearly 90%. According to our
Mm-hmm.
users, it's much higher. Okay, so let's just assume that that's real. Well, you have an active
Yeah.
market, you have a growing market. We have an
Hmm.
extremely strong momentum within our customer base and within our product usage. And so those things are going to help determine like how good is the marketing support? How good is your
Hmm.
sales engineering? How
Okay.
good is the leadership that supports you? Are they creating policies where you can make money, right?
Yeah.
Because an OTE is not a comp plan. It is not a product. It is not the leadership that is flying across the country to support you or not, right? Those types of things are way more important to learn about because you could have an OT of 200, and we have folks that do this that absolutely crush somebody with an OT of 300. So I would be
Interesting.
very,
Yeah,
very
for sure.
careful of an OTE when you're looking for a role and you have an OTE that says, well, it's 300 and this other one's offering me 240.
Right.
That is meaningless. I mean, I'm still on a 50-50 split and I'm an executive with
Yeah.
our organization. So I think it's critical that you look far beyond that and you choose the company, not the offer. But I'll speak to it a little bit more detailed. Fully ramped AEs. And last
Got it.
year, nearly 70% of our strategic AEs hit their number. I mean, just think about that. That
Okay.
is a extremely high attainment rate.
Yep.
And in other areas, we had folks like we kind of break down between account management and expansion, a new logo.
Okay.
And most of the other areas of our business was also close to 70% with new logo and almost 85% with expansion and account management.
Okay. Yeah. So if I'm just reading here from the review, so great experience, passionate sales leaders and CEO. Okay, cool. They care about their employees and customers. And then working with Motive is rewarding because I feel like I'm making the world a safer place. So I don't know if you wrote that one, but it seems to capture some of the things that you mentioned. And the thing that stands out to me is that safety thing, which does seem like it's a pretty integral part of not only the sales pitch, but kind of the culture and what people feel like they're, working on.
When I came to Motive, there were some things that I wasn't expecting, right?
Okay.
Most of technology, my background had been about making organizations more efficient, helping them drive more revenue, helping them differentiate or innovate. And when we were first interviewing customers, they were talking about how it was reducing collisions and how their costs had gone down and how people were safer. It was really important. People's
Hmm.
entire careers, think of doctors, their entire
Yeah.
careers are spent on making people healthy and keeping them alive. And I think that we're participating in that. And it's just a fact of what we do. And that's the bottom
Okay.
line. And
Yeah.
it is different. So I did not write that, but
Good.
I'm not surprised in the least.
And this one says just opened the enterprise account management team. This looks like it's from February 2025. Said the upside is strong. So curious about that one. It kind of caught my eye, and it mentions some expansion, I guess, or maybe a new role in the enterprise team, which obviously is near and dear to your heart, I imagine. Talk a little bit about that.
It is. So our enterprise and strategic organization has grown over 300% since I joined 2 years ago. I mean, it is fueling the growth of
Wow.
our organizations. It's on the backs of great companies that we were just talking about, not just FedEx, but CoolSys, Lumen, Inframark, Mavis Tires. Just a lot of great companies, a lot of great brands, great operations, and great people, right? We show up really, really well. I think this operation is high performing. I would put it up against any technology
Hmm.
organization. We've increased the number of both not only the $1 million type customers that are paying us more than $1 million a year in ARR, but also the
Okay.
100,000 plus customers. I mean, we're up more than 50% in these categories year over year.
Okay.
And so it does create a lot of opportunity for folks. And this person's talking about account management, which means that once you become a customer, some of our accounts move to account management and are no longer owned by an AE. And so they're
Hmm.
responsible for the customer experience, right? Measuring that. They're responsible for making sure that our customers are being retained and referring others and that they're not churning and that they are introduced to more product, right? I mean, that
Yeah.
they have an opportunity to buy more of what we have. And so this is a really exciting area for us. We do it all throughout our business, but enterprise is special, I think, right now in the sense of if you're an enterprise or strat and you're looking for a place where it's a fun environment, it's a high performing environment that will push you,
Hmm.
and it is doing the thing. This area is certainly doing that. So I can see where this comment came from for sure.
Let's say I'm an enterprise rep, maybe, or mid-market rep at another sales org. I'm doing well, but there's just some things that have been bugging me about, the quota, the comp plan that's changed for the third time in the year. Yeah, I'm making money, but I'm just a little tired of various things, or maybe things have just gotten a little stale. If I were to consider Motive right now, you mentioned a few things already, but what are some of the factors that make this particular moment a good time to to join your team?
Motive specifically, we look for motivated people, right? And you can talk about grit and what that means and the definition. I think that's
Mhm.
kind of an overused term, frankly. But the bottom line is that it is real, and we are going to hire motivated people. There is one thing we cannot do, and that is get somebody out of bed. They have to be intrinsically driven. We can guide, lead, teach, coach. We can hopefully inspire, but as far as motive, if somebody wants to consider this role, it has to be something where they want to succeed. They are driven, and not just want to, but they are willing to put in that work to go and do it. Because if
Hmm.
you're not, then it won't be a match for who we are, right? We work hard not just on prospecting, but in the
Hmm.
way that we talk to our customers, in the way that we support our customers, in the way that we support each other. And so I think it's critical that somebody, if they're going to consider motive, knows that we have that expectation, right? That you are going to go through the conditioning, that we are going to stay sharp. And everybody's going to expect that from you here. We're over 3,000 employees. I mean, it's going to happen. And so I think that's a qualification. Now, to your point, I think that most of the rest of the conversation has proven the point, right? It's a place that you can make a lot of money. It's a place that you can be happy. And those two things are hard to do. You have to have a
Yeah,
market, you
sure.
have to have a policy, you have to have a product in order to make
Hmm.
money. You have to have the right territory, you have to have a good leadership. And to be
Yeah.
happy, you have to have a culture that is not, lame, right? It's got to be
Right.
like, kind of
Yeah.
fun and edgy and,
Right. Right.
and,
Yeah.
and interesting. And it's a place where you can make an impact. I mean, that last
Sure.
one of those reviews you talked about, it was about the impact that we have, right? I mean,
Okay.
it's yeah. I mean, I guess there's a lot of companies out there that can consolidate other technologies and save a company
Hmm.
some money. You can talk to
Yes.
IT and that's cool, man. And that's you can make a lot of money. And I'm not
Right.
dissing that org.
Sure.
If you have an emotional connection to human life and helping an organization to maintain an operation at a high
Yeah.
scale, then we would be a good place.
You mentioned sort of that drive, that motivation, getting out of bed in the morning, kind of with that fire in your belly sort of thing. I can certainly see why you want that on your sales team. How do you look for that in the interview process? I'm curious.
Well, I'll speak for myself, and then I'll speak for sort of what we try to do. I mean, we try to get to know people.
Hmm.
I think standard interview questions are a thing of the 20th century that should have been left there, right?
Okay.
Tell me about your biggest strength
Sure.
is like I don't know what I'm learning in that
Hmm.
question. So we try to situationally figure out how somebody's going to approach something. So some of the things that
Okay.
I do is, I might know the company, right? They might work for
Sure. Sure.
I don't know, a company that I know of, a Sprinkler
Hmm.
or a
Yeah.
DocuSign or something, right? I
Hmm.
know these companies. Okay.
Yeah.
So, hey, that's interesting. How would you describe that company to me? Right.
Mm.
And I listen for how, like, what is their path to describe their own company? Have they taken the time up to this point in their career to be able to master an
Yeah.
explanation of how they do what they do? As one example,
Okay.
right? Instead
Hmm.
of saying, so I didn't ask them to pitch it. I'm not saying,
Right.
hey, gear up and pitch me. I'm
Yeah.
just trying to see, are they naturally ready the way that I would expect them to be after working for years here,
Sure.
right? Another thing might be trying to situationally figure out something like, what's most likely to go wrong,
Mm.
and if they're not self-aware, right? If it's,
That's
well, maybe the
interesting.
product fell apart, right? Maybe
Yeah.
you hired somebody told me one time, maybe I hired too many people. I
Hmm.
said, I mean, this is the end of this conversation, right? Like,
Yeah.
if you haven't even started yet and you're not self-aware at all, so those things imply grit, right? We
Hmm.
try to figure out, how are you going to do this? So let's say that you're going to show up and I place the yellow pages in front of you and you've got to go and make calls. How are you going to do
Sure.
that?
Okay.
Right? And of
Yeah.
course, today people are like,
Mm.
what's a yellow pages? Right?
Right.
But you get a list of accounts, and we know these accounts are in our ICP. We know a lot about them.
Yeah.
What are you doing? Right? And I
Hmm.
just leave it open. And then what else are
Mm.
you doing? What if I gave you $1 million? Then
Right.
what are you doing?
Right. What
Right.
other
And
things?
so these are just examples of how I
Yeah.
do it. The other things, of
Test
course, try to
creativity.
get them to meet a lot of people. And we do that for two reasons. One is that we want them to get to know us. Okay. It's
Hmm.
critical because if we're going to do this thing together, we're going to spend our waking lives working
Yeah.
towards an outcome, then
Hmm.
let's let you should feel like you like us,
Right.
right? Like you should feel like
Sure.
this thing's gonna go well
Yeah.
and that we're
Hmm.
cool and like or that you can see yourself really being driven by the people that you're talking to. So
Hmm.
it's partly for them, and then for us, it's different functions. It's not just
Okay.
sales leadership. It might be somebody in ops or support or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's part of how we do this. We get to know them, and I also try to figure out what are they into. I mean, what do you
Hmm.
do
Okay.
outside of
Yeah.
work? How do you
Sure.
spend your time? How do you keep your game sharp when it comes to the
Right.
sales thing? What have you listened to or watched or do
Mm.
you how do you so I know that's a broad set of questions, Jordan. I don't think I'm
Hmm.
stiff where I always do the same things,
Right. Right.
but I try to be present in interviews and ask folks these types of questions to get to
Cool.
know them. But like, are they? I'll tell you another thing, and this is easy, and maybe this is an answer to the test for a lot of the folks
Hmm.
listening. But I will always ask a candidate what questions they have for me.
Sure.
And
Okay.
when they ask me questions, I want to know that they've been listening throughout the interview process and our discussion to ask me something natural and relevant to our conversation, right?
Hmm.
If it's tell me about your sales culture, and
Yeah.
I am the last interview, and you've gone through and met
Hmm.
all these folks, and you have not been able to tell me what you've observed about our sales culture, that's
Yeah.
a bit off-putting, right? It tells me that you're
Right.
asking me
Right.
something generic that might be important to you, but you probably could have learned about that up to this point and done your own
Hmm.
discovery. And so I like it when folks ask questions that are relevant, that are genuine, that show a curiosity that they care. Again, that they
Hmm.
have the grit to say, what about
Right.
this
Right.
thing, right?
What's a prediction that you have about maybe the next, I don't know, 12 to 24 months, let's say through the end of 2026 around sort of sales and tech? What's one trend that you see or something that, if we check back in a year, we can kind of check you on something that you think, this is something we'll see in the next year to 2 years that you would predict.
Well, I'll go back to where I started this conversation. That is, I think too many organizations are going to over rotate towards automation.
Okay.
And those who build genuine human connections and they ask relationship oriented questions, they're curious about their customers, they want to solve a real problem for their customers, are going to win out. I really believe
Okay.
that. I think there's going to be a lot of turnover with sales. Everybody's going to jump into the newest, hottest AI thing, and it's a little bit noisy. And so I think that there's going to be some starts and stops there. There might be some pain. We did feel that, by the way, over the last 5 years, right? Where folks would jump
Okay.
into the hot startup that was a little overvalued. And so folks might be a little bit more cautious than they were there. But if there's one piece of advice here, it's that hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. And I
Okay.
think that hard work has to involve human connection, talking to people, building real relationships, not I'm calling this person and they had an interest in my technology. And so I'm just going to be led around a process where I answer all their
Sure.
questions. Like genuine relationships are very hard to come by. I think that's something we got right at the end of the last century. I think that's something that like folks did, and we've kind
Hmm.
of gone away from it a little bit, and folks feel like a number, especially as we scale as an organization at Motive. It's a very real risk for us. We have
Hmm.
hundreds of thousands of active customer accounts. And we have millions of users. And so like
Right.
so the risk there is that we don't have a connection. And so we are over rotating towards that. And I think that is a prediction that I have for sales. I do think that there's going to be opportunity to leverage AI. So we should stay sharp. Everybody should know some ideas. The things that you used to waste time on, you might be able to get away with something a little bit more automated than that right now. But
Yeah.
it's just never going to go like this, right? This podcast is not going to be nearly as interesting if I generated it with an avatar. Okay,
Sure.
like it's just not going
Sure.
to be as
Hmm.
interesting. And I think we're
Yeah.
we're we're on the cusp of over rotating towards that kind of fake connection or whatever. And so I think that's it. And but I think some of where we are is going to continue also. I think that's part of my prediction.